So in a previous video, we touched a little bit on perpendicular lines and how they're different from parallel lines. Because parallel lines are lines with the exact same slope, and perpendicular lines are lines where their slope is the opposite reciprocal, meaning that they have this different sign. Positive becomes negative, negative becomes positive. And reciprocal, meaning we swap out the denominator for the numerator and we switch that sign, and that gives us our perpendicular the slopes for our perpendicular lines. And remember that if you multiply the slopes together, you should get -1 as your answer, and then their intersection point will give you 90 degrees. They'll be orthogonal. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like when we put a little bit of algebra and a little bit of graphing behind it. All right, so what we want to do is find the equation of a perpendicular bisector for the line segment whose endpoints are from 1 to -1 and then 5 to -3. So how can we go about doing that? Well, it might help to sketch this out a little bit. And again, it doesn't have to be anything too technical, but let's go ahead and just say that I have A at 1, -1, and I have B at 5, -3. It's relative because 5 is going to be a little bit further to the right of 1. -3 is going to be a little bit below -1. There we go. So it's about right. And I want to know the equation of the perpendicular bisector for this line. So how do I go about doing that? Well, first what I need to do is I need to figure out what the slope is of this black line. So that way when I reciprocate it and then change the sign, I will now have the slope for that line. So if I'm going to go ahead and find M, let's think about this. I'm going to have y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. M is going to give me -3 plus 1 all over 4. M is going to give me -2 all over 4. M is going to be equal to -1/2. So what does that mean? That if this is -1/2, well then my perpendicular bisector, which I'll go ahead and label in red, that is going to have a slope of +2 because 1 and 2 will flip, the negative will become a positive. I'm given something very important here that's going to bring back what we've covered in a previous video, is that I want the equation of the perpendicular bisector. What a bisector is, it is literally something that bisects a line. Bi meaning two, and then sex meaning sections. So when you think of bisector, just think of two equal sides, meaning that it is going to essentially chop this thing in half at a perpendicular angle. Okay, that's an easy way to remember it. And so what we need to do is, just like our last time where we actually did this in 3 dimensions, we actually only need to do it in 2 dimensions this time. We need to find the midpoint, because if we find the average in x's, we'll find that it'll be somewhere around here. If we find the average in y's, we'll find it'll be somewhere around here. We'll get this middle point, and now that we know that the slope is a +2, we can go ahead and find an equation like so. So if I want to find the midpoint, I would go ahead and say, okay, x1 plus x2 all over 2, y2 plus y1 or 2 all over 2. All right, so my midpoint is going to be of 6 over 2. I'll have 3. Then I'll have -4 over 2, which is going to give me -2. That's my midpoint. And so now, if I know that this guy right here is 3, -2, I know what my slope is, I can now actually form my perpendicular equation, my perpendicular bisector equation, because we all know that it comes down to y equals mx plus b. I don't know what b is. I do not know what that y-intercept is just yet. But what I do know is that my slope is 2 because it is the opposite reciprocal of this. I know that my y is going to be -2, and my 3 will be in for x. So let's just go ahead and plug in those values. Plus b, that'll give me -2 is equal to 6 plus b. That'll give me -8 is equal to b, meaning the equation of my perpendicular bisector is going to be 2x minus 8. So that's how you can go from having 2 points, finding the slope, reciprocating that slope, figuring out what the midpoint is, plugging those into your y equals mx plus b equation, finding your missing value of b, and voila, we are ending up with the final answer. And if you want to see what this looks like graphically, all I did was I put in my function for 1, -1 going to 5, -3. I did that using my spreadsheet, my TI Inspire, and then I limited it to from 1 to 5 because that was my x my domain constraint. And so it gave me that. And as you can see, this 2x minus 8 line, it definitely looks like it's chopping it in half, and it definitely looks like it is a 90-degree angle, and it is intersecting this at 3, -2, which is the midpoint. So it's always nice to check these things graphically just to make sure that your answer is making sense. All right, so let's say a border canal is going to divide two countries. Now let's say that bridge AB is going to connect two sides of the canal, and it's perpendicular to its banks. Now, point C, and I'm given 1017, so I'll go ahead and write that one in, is the midpoint of the bridge AB. Okay, that's the midpoint, great. And then the equation of AB is y equals 0.5x plus 6. So this right here, I'll go ahead and I'll label as y equals 0.5x plus 6. So now we want to find the equation of the borderline that equally divides the bridge and the canal between the two countries, aka we want to find out what this is right here. We want to figure out what cuts this in half, and then also is 90-degree angle. It's orthogonal. It's perpendicular bisector to AB. And we're actually given a lot of the hard information already. So if I want to write this line, well, I know that in general, y is going to be equal to mx plus b or c, depending on how you want to do it. Well, here's the thing, is that if this slope right here is positive 1/2, so let's say, the slope of AB is equal to positive 1/2, 0.5. Well, then the slope of the perpendicular line has to be -2. And that's exactly what I can put in for here. I can write y is equal to -2x plus b. And I'm actually already given that this midpoint right here is 1017. So it has to go through this point, 1017. This is awesome because my problem just got a lot easier. It's way quicker than the other ones, because now I can just go ahead and plug this all in, and then I would get 37 is equal to b, meaning that my equation would be -2x plus 37. And that's it. So again, a lot of the information can sometimes be given to you, and as long as you know how to use it appropriately, you'll be able to get the correct answer quite quickly. And this one might look like one of the harder problems because you have this weird shape over here that you're not used to seeing. There's a whole entire paragraph of text. But if you actually just extract out the correct information, that this is the midpoint, here's your equation, find the perpendicular line, it's not that hard. So now let's say that you have a robot vacuum cleaner, like a Roomba, okay? And let's say like you kind of girded out your house a little bit, and let's say that there's this point A, which is 410, and it's always good to label these if you're given a diagram. So let's go ahead and label that at 410. And it's currently cleaning on a straight line from A to B, which is 19.5. Ooh, there's a little robot. So let's go ahead and put 19.5. Boom. Now the robot charging station is located at point E, which is 6.3. 6.3. Now, the vacuum cleaner is going to have to return to E to recharge, of course. And it has to do it before it reaches B. However, it's programmed so that it will turn towards E at a point D, which is on AB, such that ED is the shortest distance from E to AB. Find the coordinates of D. Man, is that a lot. That can definitely sound confusing. I can see why you'd be a little confused on that one. So all it's saying is that it's going to have to return to point E to recharge. So it cannot make it all the way to point B. What it has to do, it has to go and at some point get back to E to recharge. Okay, so it's programmed so that it will turn towards E at a point D on AB. So that means is that D is somewhere on this line right here, such that ED, meaning that E to wherever we end up putting D, is the shortest distance from E to AB. And there's a very simple property here that actually makes this whole kind of convoluted sentence make a whole lot more sense. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So it's saying is that it needs to be a straight line from E to wherever it intersects at AB. And there's also another little property that this line is going to make a 90-degree angle. It's going to be orthogonal. It's going to be perpendicular. So I know that that's a lot of assumptions that you have to make in this kind of problem, but there you go. There's the assumptions. So what we want to do is we want to find that this point right here, D is, we want to know the coordinates of D. What are these X and Y coordinates D? Because we don't know them yet. But what we do know is that this is 410. We know that this is 19 5, and we know that this is 6, 3. So let's go ahead and figure out what we need to know. So I mentioned that this is going to be a straight line, meaning that this is going to have a y equals mx plus b form. And I also mentioned that this is going to make a 90-degree angle because that's part of the property that makes it the shortest distance in this case. So if this is orthogonal, what that means is that the slope of this line, ED, will be the opposite reciprocal of this line, AB. So since I have these 2 points laid out right in front of me, let's go ahead and figure out what that slope is. Flip the numerator and denominator, either change the negative to a positive or positive to a negative, and then that'll be our slope. So let's go ahead and let's figure out what the slope is. So my slope of AB will be equal to y2 minus y1. So I have y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. So the slope of AB will be equal to negative 5 all over 15. So the slope of AB is equal to negative 1/3. And again, this is my 90-degree angle line that I'm looking for, the ED. That means that the slope of ED, which I'll put in blue, is going to be equal to the opposite reciprocal, meaning positive 3. So now I can actually quite easily find the equation on my perpendicular line because I know that y is going to be equal to mx plus b. I know that my m is positive 3. I know that my x is 6 and my y is 3. So let me go ahead and plug in 3 is equal to m, which is also 3, x, which is 6, plus b. That's going to be 3 equals to 18 plus b. b will be equal to negative 15, meaning that my equation is y is equal to 3x minus 15. So now here is where things might get a little confusing, is because I need to figure out what D is, right? It is a point of intersection, and you can clearly see from AB, it's not in the middle. So this is not a bisector that we're talking about. So what we need to think of this is, instead of it being a bisector, we need to think of this as being a point of intersection, meaning that this line intersects this line. So we can figure out what this equation is, which we've already done, and set it equal to this equation over here. We can figure out which x and y coordinates they both share, meaning that that's their point of intersection, which is exactly what D is going to be. So what does that mean? It means I need to figure out what this equation is here, which fortunately for us, we already found what the slope was, which is negative 1/3, and I have a point right here, 410. So let me go ahead. If I have y is equal to mx plus b, y would be 10. The slope is negative 1/3. My x is 4, and then my b is over there. So what would that give me? That would give me 10 is equal to negative 4/3 plus b. What would that then give me is that after I simplify this down, b would be equal to 11 1/3. So again, I now have an equation for this green line going right there, and I now have an equation for this perpendicular line going here. So now, if we set these two equations equal to each other, or if you put them in a graphing calculator and use the intersection function there, you can figure out which x and y coordinates these two would give you. So now, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do it by hand. So if I set 3x, minus 15 equal to negative 1/3 x plus 11 1/3, what exactly is that going to give me? Well, again, I'm going to group all the x's on one side, so I'll have 3x plus 1/3 x is equal to 11 1/3 plus 15. Then once you're at this step, again, if you want to do this by hand, you're more than welcome to. If you want to put it into your calculator, that's also fine. But you should get that x is equal to 7.9. Okay, and once you figure that out, you just plug it back into any of these equations. You can plug 7.9 into here, or you can plug it into here. You'll get the same exact answer, which is that y is 8.7. So what does that mean? It means that our intersection is at a point of 7.9 and 8.7, and that is going to be the coordinate of D. So again, to wrap up, there's a lot going on here. We knew that we have this line right here on the Roomba. We know that the Roomba was going to make a straight line from somewhere on here, such that it was a straight line and also orthogonal or perpendicular to it. So what we had to do was we had to find the slope of this line using this point and this point, so that way we could flip it or reciprocate it and then change the polarity, change it from negative to positive or positive to negative to figure out this slope. Once we did that, we had to figure out what this equation was and what this equation was, because we had to set these equations equal to each other, because this is a point of intersection, meaning that whatever the x and y are that satisfy both of these individual equations is going to give us the point where these two lines intersect. That one was quite involved. Don't be afraid to go back and watch it a second time. Again, I hope this helps shed a little bit of light into how perpendicular lines work and how we can use the equation and the graph to help solve some oftentimes much more involved and complicated problems. But again, if you break it down step by step, you'll get it every single time, as long as you are careful with your work and you are correct in your setup. All right, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.